Pastor, first, we're so sorry for your grief and the loss. We can't imagine what your church is going through right now. How is the church and the community doing, going through such grief and just processing all of this?
The church there, obviously they're grieving. They're still in the state of shock. So they're hurting because they were very close to the family. But in another sense, they're doing okay. The Lord's carrying them through, and they have one another, and so they're doing okay. Yeah.
Judgment and accusations toward the church are sometimes the responses after a horrific event like this. Many people look at the church and might see racism, division, and intolerance. How do we create true unity, especially as we look at racism in our society right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, in this case and some other cases in the past, people who have committed these acts have been tied to churches, right? So
Mhm.
I think rightfully, when our society looks at us, they want to see something in the church, what's happening.
Mhm.
And I think that's a rightful fear that many people have. Um, One of the things that I would encourage the church primarily to think carefully about is to listen to one another.
Mhm.
I think in my article that I ended with a notion of hermeneutic of trust, because there's immediate suspicion that happens, I think, with the current state of affairs in our culture of tribalism, where, if you're not on someone's side, then there's immediate suspect. And I think along race lines, there's that even within the church, where there's immediate suspicion when people think differently or have different thoughts about certain issues. And so I think the church needs to do a better job of just listening as a demonstration of love for our brothers and sisters. So I think that needs to take place. And I think on another level, the church needs to do a better job of sort of acknowledging, hey, there are problems. We have not only historically have had this problem, especially here in the United States. The denomination that I belong to, the Southern Baptist Convention, it was founded on the issue of slavery. So I mean,
Mhm.
there's a long history of issues of racism. I think we need to acknowledge that and come to terms and fix things where that needs to be fixed. Um, so often, I think we see people kind of stiff arm, sort of when there's discomfort about certain conversations, or if someone might feel implicated in a certain, conversation. But I think we need to acknowledge and just say, hey, look, we messed up here. Let's try to do better. Uh, let's repent of the things that that hasn't been good and try to make things better. Um, the final appeal I think I would make to the church community is to be really biblical. And I mean that in the sense that, um, you know, we're supposed to be people of love. And I think First Corinthians 13 teaches that.
Mm.
I think so often Christians tend to want to be right. And even if I'm right and I have the truth, but it lacks love, it rings hollow. So, I think we really need to think about what it means to be biblical as God's people, and not so much reflect our culture per se.
Yeah. Pastor Yu, we have seconds left, but I do want to ask you also in your article, you say, I do believe that our shared faith as evangelicals offers us not only a place to mourn the state of our country, but also a grounding from which to change our response. Can you expand on that quickly? What does that look like as a nation that has prided itself on standing on the beliefs of Christianity and faith? What does that look like as we grapple this issue of racism?
I think one of the things that evangelicals have forgotten or just don't realize is that historically, our forefathers were pioneers in thinking about issues of justice and activism. And so, for example, in the 19th century, uh, there were these pastors called the Edwardians, and they were sort of the posterity of the famous American preacher Jonathan Edwards. People know him with that one sermon, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." And it was this posterity, these robust evangelicals who worked to abolish slavery and activism, thinking about social justice and caring for the poor, the widows, and the orphans, is a legacy that they left for us. And I think we've forgotten that. And in some sense, evangelicals feel today as if you think about social justice or activism or caring for the poor, it seems like we're selling out on the gospel. And I want to point out that's not it. That evangelicals have a robust history of working for the betterment of people around us. And so I would encourage our evangelical friends to think carefully about their legacy, and what the Bible teaches about what true religion reflects.
So, what our responsibility is according
Yes,
to Christ. Thank you so much, Pastor Cholyu, for your time today.